NFL Week 3, fast approaching. Here to break down the board from a betting perspective, Las Vegas Cris. Odds are many of you know Chris as a pro bettor, 1/3 of the Bet US NFL show alongside Steve Fezzik and Jared Smith, and the whole package behind his exceptional YouTube channel. You can subscribe on YouTube and follow him on the platform formerly known as Twitter via the same handle at Las Vegas Cris with no H in Chris. Chris, it was great to see you in person for our annual Lotus of Siam meal while I was in town for Bet Bash last month, and it's great to see you in this forum as well. Welcome back to Props and Hops.
Good to be back with you, man. It was good to see you recently, and I've got that other Thai restaurant we have to try next time you're in town. Somebody just brought it up this morning to me, so.
Oh, nice. Sounds good. I don't want to get too far off track right off the top here, but I know Lay Thai also very highly thought of in Vegas. Is that the spot you have in mind, or is there another one that we should put on the radar?
No, I took you to Lay Thai once. That's the one downtown.
Yeah, I remember that with Brady Cannon. That was a great time.
No, I forget what, like Nataya or something like that. Secret Kitchen.
Okay, cool. Happy to add another one to the arsenal on an upcoming Vegas trip. In the meantime, we will get on with it as far as Week 3 in the NFL is concerned. To our audience joining us live across Twitter and YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to jump in the chat with any thoughts or questions along the way, and we'll be happy to weave that into the show where possible. Chris, for starters, I want to address something briefly that exists as your pinned post on Twitter, also prominently featured on your YouTube channel, a video titled My Toughest Handicap. And I'm asking this first because I think it's so much more important than anything we'll discuss related to betting. And you looked and sounded great when we were together last month. You're looking and sounding good once again today. So to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, how's your health holding up these days?
Yeah, well, the chia head is gone. I got my full head of hair back. But on a serious note, my pinned post addresses an issue that I think affects everybody in some way, shape, or form. So I encourage people to at least listen to some of it because I was shocked. I consider myself very well-rounded knowledge-wise, a plethora of useless knowledge, I always say. And I was just flabbergasted at how much there was to learn about my personal health battles. So, and it affects people in so many different ways. And if you don't have insurance or you have a family member that might be affected, you're gonna gain benefit from it because there's just I spoke very candidly and referenced stuff that I'm positive people would not feel comfortable mentioning. So I give some insight on basically what I was going through, some of the obstacles I was facing, and maybe some of the obstacles people in my life were facing. So I feel it's a very valuable amount of time spent to just hear it out, even if you listen to it on fast speed.
Sure. And that's one, I'd say for a lot of people listening to this conversation on something like 2x speed might be a fair way to go for that video. I would encourage people maybe to try to stay on 1x speed, maybe even watch it and then consider rewatching it. So much transparency, as you touched on, a lot of value for people who care about your health and also just need to get some more information in general and can benefit from everything that you've learned along the way recently. And Chris, as people might be speeding up the pace of their listening cadence to this podcast, we will go ahead and pivot to the NFL. Want to start by taking a step back 2 weeks into the season and get your thoughts on perhaps a team that you've upgraded the most thus far and also a team that you've downgraded the most through 2 weeks.
Well, I don't really go into the season filing people into like a rating. I don't create a power rating for a team. I don't carry ratings from the previous seasons in. I just believe that the turnover on teams is just so voluminous that I just think after the first couple of weeks last year doesn't matter anymore. It's just a whole new dynamic, and teams are going to be who they are, after a short time into the season. So It's getting a little bit more difficult now that they're not really playing preseason, and I think you're seeing the teams that aren't preparing during preseason paying the price. I think we said it last year that maybe we'll see something different this year, and I think we saw even fewer players playing. So, just basically, I just think it's obvious that. Let's see. I think. The standout team obviously is New Orleans, and I don't think that is just make believe. I think they've always been decent defensively. They've always been burdened with too many injuries. People forget how good Kamara is because he's missed so much time. They've got Olave, and I think Carr is playing on house money there. He didn't want to stay where he wasn't wanted, and I think that could be a really good situation for him. And can he hold this pace the entire season? Probably not. But you're really just trying to, in this league, to have a healthy quarterback that just doesn't cost you games. And if he can be that, that puts him ahead of a lot of teams. But I felt that anybody could have won that division going in. So they've got a nice head start on it. We'll just have to see if they keep it up. But that's definitely an upgraded team. And I think we're all surprised by Pittsburgh a little bit. But, it's still too early to say what's going to happen with them. We knew that they had to come out of the gate hard and fast. They had a horrible schedule. And if they didn't come out of the gate fast, their season was going to be basically over. I mean, if they were 0-2 at this point, they're done. So they've done exactly what they needed to do. We'll have to see if they can keep it up, because this week they're playing a game that they should be able to win. And we know from tradition, Pittsburgh seems to win the games you don't expect them to win, and then they lose the games you expect them to win. So we're going to see this weekend a little bit more of the onion peeled off on what that team's about. And I guess, my Lions are a little bit of a downgrade just because they have some internal problems that concern me. When you get into the red zone 7 times and you score 9 points, that's a big problem. If you're losing to a team like Tampa Bay, they could very easily be 0-2. They got lucky to beat the Rams. So they have all the pieces there, but there's something wrong, and it could be a Goff issue because he was throwing some hot garbage around the field. It was pretty bad, but they were able to get pressure on him. And when he was under pressure, he was a 50% passer. He threw 2 picks, and he did not look good. So something to keep an eye on. Once they hit on all cylinders, you'd think that they're going to really want to take it out on a team. So, and that could be this week against Arizona for all we know.
Well, when we get to sides, I have some thoughts teed up involving the games that the Steelers and Saints will be involved in. But first, I want to start, as we have the first couple weeks this season on this show, with the props on the current week's betting board. Chris, I've got one I'd like to run by you for some thoughts. It's a lean for me right now. I plan to bet it when it becomes more widely available. And that would be a split ticket on J.K. Dobbins rushing yards under 49.5 and longest rush under 14.5. Again, thinking split ticket on these 2 bets, 1 unit total in exposure. As far as my handicap goes, Dobbins has come out of the gates on fire, back-to-back games with 130-plus rushing yards and a touchdown to start his Chargers career. And that's been great to see, hopefully a sign of return to health for him. But it's been aided significantly by explosives. 4 carries of at least 40 yards through 2 games. I'm expecting the Steelers' defensive front to present a reality check as far as that's concerned. And I think it's fair to note from a numbers perspective, these prop numbers for Dobbins, that rushing yardage total that is posted at some books right now, down from last week when he closed in the mid-50s and his longest rush last week was 15.5. So directionally, I think this downward adjustment is correct given this week's matchup. I just don't think the adjustment is quite enough yet. I think Pittsburgh represents a 180 in terms of degree of difficulty the week after facing a porous Panthers defense without its best player. Also, more physicality in this one could mean a bit more of a Gus Edwards game. He's 3 inches taller, more than 20 pounds heavier, perhaps a better build to absorb some of the collisions that the Steelers are going to be looking to deliver defensively. So a couple quick caveats here, Chris, that I want your thoughts. Rushing yards for Dobbins, that prop is up at some books, but not quite widely available yet. I think maybe with some of the Justin Herbert injury uncertainty, books have been slower to post player props for this matchup. I want to be ready to pounce on this one when it is more widely available. And the longest rush prop likely to be posted closer to kickoff. I'm anticipating that over-under coming in at 14.5. I think I'd play it down to 13.5. So, Chris, all that said on my end, any thoughts from you when it comes to a look at J.K. Dobbins under 49.5 rushing yards and longest rush under 14.5 this Sunday in Pittsburgh?
Oh, I think that's an excellent look on it. And I'm curious to how you feel the market will respond to, because I think you've got the right angle on it, but with the 2 previous games under his belt, he's drawn some attention to himself. And don't you think it's plausible that people are going to be looking over, that number is a lot lower than what he's been getting?
That's a really good point. And it reminds me of something I still need to check myself on sometimes. Your own personal handicap is often only half the battle, if that. There's also the rest of the marketplace to consider. So as much as I like this handicap and I want to be ready to pounce, I think I'm going to take those words to heart and give this some time. Let it percolate, as you say, and maybe some of these numbers drift up because of the encouraging Dobbins numbers from weeks 1 and 2, and perhaps make a better bet because I could be getting better numbers with the same handicap in mind closer to kickoff. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, obviously I have the luxury of having a lot more options available. So the urgency really isn't always there. It really depends on what your access is. But for something like that, I would probably want to, let it go out there and see where it ticks first. So, getting the best of the number and getting every last point or yard is just so crucial. It matters. We almost had a 4th game land on 6, didn't we?
Yeah, I think Eagles Falcons would have been that last one.
So, and I would have paid the price on that because I missed the 6, and thankfully it didn't matter. But I did a personal evaluation on that game and said, oh, there's not going to be a 4th game that lands on 6. So the 5.5 is going to be okay. And sure enough, it was in play.
Yeah, it almost wasn't. Well, speaking of 6 as a key number in sides, I've got a few sides to run by you this week. None of them involving 6, but some key numbers may come into play here. So as we shift to other markets beyond props, thinking not just sides, but if you have any thoughts when it comes to totals, teasers, derivatives, season-long futures, anything on your radar right now, Chris, is there anywhere that you'd like to start in terms of spots where you see some value on the betting board as it currently stands?
I was surprised. This was the first time I run my model, and I was surprised at how in line the model was so early. Usually week 3, it's all over the board, and the numbers really, are off on Pluto in many cases, and the model's in pretty decent shape somehow. So I'm kind of excited about that because it's obviously actionable. If it's reading most of the market right, then it becomes a little bit more trustworthy faster than normal. I'm hoping so. And I did not. Last year was the first losing year I had in I think 6 or 7 years. So I'm looking to get back on track with the model this year. I'm hoping that last year was just an anomaly and I think it was. The bad ball or toss-up game luck just is gone against me, and that's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about that. But it's just frustrating. So I'm looking forward to some bounces going my way this year again. But as far as actionable stuff, I'm looking down the road. I'm really just trying to get a toehold into the market, so to speak. There's a lot of people that are. I listen to the stations and various media outlets, and they're saying, oh, well, this week 5 this, and this week 6 this, and this division that, and it's like, well, wait a minute. We haven't seen Jack Diddley at this point, and We can't even trust that New Orleans is a good team. We can't even trust New England's a bad team. There's so much stuff that we have yet to see. I value my money too much to be, looking ahead so much at this point. Unless you're finding, at this point, you're just looking for off numbers, value numbers. And then you kind of go backward and say, okay, is there value in it, if that makes any sense? So I'm not creating specific bets. If I can find off numbers, then I'll work backward and go, does that make sense to take advantage of that number?
Got it. And that reminds me of an approach that I think a lot of prudent bettors whom I've learned from have taken, where it's not always logging into a book with a specific team or bet in mind, but often it's just to kind of take in the board as a whole. And if anything stands out, spot the sucker, to quote the logic of sports betting, versus inventing the wheel yourself.
It's absolutely incredulous how you can piss away an entire day just going through accounts and looking at lines and looking at offerings. And it's remarkable how many new offerings and different offerings or variations of offerings are out there in the marketplace. And when you run across these things, you need to file it away in your brain that they're available, number one. And number two, I try to imagine how I might be able to fold offerings into other bets. If there's any way that it gives me insurance on something, or just, any sort of thing that I can tie into something else, I'm always looking for, because I think that brings up unusual opportunities.
Well, let's get into a few games where you may be thinking more creatively than I am at this stage. 3 sides I want to run by you, and these are all games I've bet quite small to this point, and I'd love to get your thoughts before potentially endorsing more strongly for the audience, should they care to consider getting in play as well. The first one that catches my interest, kind of building on the prop bet we discussed, Pittsburgh -1.5 hosting the Chargers. I feel like Jim Harbaugh might be a bit of a mirror to Mike Tomlin here in terms of head coach who's working wonders for the team's culture, but maybe some questions already starting to pop up about game management. Last week, a couple things that stood out to me when it came to 4th down decisions and timeout management. On 4th down, 2 pretty iffy punts to me when it comes to the Chargers' decision-making by the early second quarter, still in a 1-score game. So this is before they had the Panthers blowout in hand. There was a 4th and 1 at their own 49 and a 4th and 5 at the Carolina 44 when Harbaugh opted to punt. From a timeout standpoint, he also wasted one at the end of the 3rd quarter when the Panthers seemed to pretty clearly just be running out the clock. Now, these were inconsequential decisions against a team like Carolina, but they might loom larger against better teams. And speaking of better teams, I think Pittsburgh, especially in terms of physicality, marks a massive step up in class from Carolina last week. From a health standpoint, also keeping a close eye on Justin Herbert. He was banged up after taking some unnecessary hits, I felt, last week with a 3-score lead late in the game. Didn't practice today. He's nursing an ankle injury on the same side as the plantar fascia injury that sidelined him for most of training camp. I still expect Herbert to play, but perhaps with limited mobility against a stout Pittsburgh defensive front. And when it comes to the Chargers being 2-0 right now, as are the Steelers, I know, but as a Chargers fan, I feel like everybody's riding high. They haven't been 2-0 for a while. It's a good feelings era to start off the Harbaugh tenure. But I feel like their perception might be a bit inflated based on Carolina's shortcomings that were on full display once again last week. And the Chargers also going +3 in turnovers and benefiting from multiple Antonio Pierce cowardly decisions on 4th down and that week 1 matchup against the Raiders. So don't get me wrong. I'm thrilled the Chargers are 2-0 to start the Harbaugh era. I wish I shared Colin Cowherd's bullishness on the Bolts being number 3 in his herd hierarchy this week. I don't think they're there quite yet. They're building in the right direction, but I just feel like Pittsburgh is a short favorite. Seems valuable to me this week. If I'm to counter this, to play devil's advocate on my own handicap here, the Chargers did stay back east this week, a little bit of a mini training camp, if you will. Not sure how to quantify that, but to the extent that it matters, it feels like it could only be a positive for them. So, Chris, all this considered, and perhaps more thoughts on your end, what do you make of Pittsburgh -1.5 hosting the Chargers on Sunday?
Well, I think, doesn't that seem like a great opportunity to create even more bonding for a new team to be on the road for that extra time period? It just seems like it's a huge win-win because having all that extra time just brings the team even closer together. And when you have a coach like Harbaugh, if you've got every single player buying in and just making that little bit of extra effort, and they have that respect to play for the coach that much harder, but that's really good, and that can make a huge difference. Little things like that, because when you're talking about so many players in and out of the lineup, if you have too many of the players that just are not focused, or not focused strongly enough, or don't care enough, it affects the whole game. So I believe that the mental approach and the mental mindset is just huge. And I think the Chargers are benefiting from it, because they're really not even as good on paper, as good of a team as they were last year. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Without Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, especially offensively, that's the case. I know they've got a new center they're plugging in as well. So, yeah, the secondary and most of the defense left a lot to be desired last year. I think just having Bosa healthy for a full season to complement Khalil Mack, you could argue the defense is better, but the offense is significantly worse on paper. And when we look at things on paper, offense also tends to be much more predictive on defense. So as a whole, I would buy the argument that just looking at the roster on paper, it's a downgrade, but as you've touched on, perhaps a pretty substantial upgrade in other areas that aren't as easily quantified by most models.
I wasn't a big proponent of the $50 million that they gave Herbert. I realized that that's the going price now, but they were kind of like the first one to hit that neighborhood, if I'm not mistaken, in a needless way. And I'm just surprised, because I don't consider him, the quarterback we thought he was. I mean, he's been in the league long enough where potential should no longer be used. So that's my concern is this what we're going to get, where he gets dinged up every year? And that plantar fasciitis, oh God, is that a pain in the ass? It's so painful, and it just plays with your mind, and hopefully he can get better, because that's something that just lingers and affects everything. But Pittsburgh, they go as TJ Watt goes. So if he's in the lineup, that team plays with a different level of intensity. He controls the defense, and he inspires. Same thing we were talking about the Chargers. He's somebody that inspires the other players to play harder. So I think the Steelers would know they just have no games to blow. This is one of those games where you expect Pittsburgh to win, and the fact that they're not a larger favorite they have no offense. That's the problem. I just think that they're going to be better with Fields in the lineup. I think he adds a little bit of potential spark, even though we haven't seen that much. Let him get acclimated, and he's got stability and coaching and leadership around him. So he may be able to impress more than people give him credit for. I favor the Chargers in this game. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I haven't done anything with it, but I lean the Chargers direction here. And I like where the line is. If you're reading the market, I would have thought the Steelers would have been larger favorites, but they're ticking up a little bit. Not that much, but just a little bit.
All right, well, we can say no ringing endorsement, obviously, on my look toward the Steelers. And I hear you looking for different ways to perhaps get in play on the Chargers. As a Chargers fan, it is comforting to hear that you are giving strong consideration to backing them in some form this week. So, Chris,
well,
I'd like to move on.
Let's say one more thing. Sorry for interrupting, but
yeah, go for it.
I'd like to see that line get up to 2 or 2.5, so we would put it in teaser category. The 1.5 is not what I consider teaser category. Even though it's technically a Wong, it's not a winner. So you need to get that 8. You need to get you need to start from the 2, not from the 1.5 or the 1.
And we can get to, I think, a pretty good process-driven teaser segment in a bit here, but specifically while we're on this game, Is that because the 8 has become more significant in recent years with the amount of times a team down 14 late would go for 2, so fewer games land on 7? The 8 and the 6 are capturing more value these days?
I think that it's more of just the reduction of the value of the 3 in the 7. I mean, I'm flabbergasted at how many fourth downs we've been seeing. I mean, bad teams are know to take their fourth downs and go for it. Whereas the field goal accuracy is so much higher now, and that also affects the number that the game is sitting on. I mean, the more field goals you have, then the numbers get a little goofy. You mix in a botched 2-point conversion or something else, then you're getting more odd scores.
All right. Well, we will certainly circle back on that when we get to teasers well beyond the scope of just the week 3 slate. But Chris, another game I wanted to run by you from a side perspective first would be Philadelphia +3 -120 or +2.5 at even money at the Saints. Now, I'm feeling like maybe a bit of an honorary Pennsylvanian so far with my thoughts on this show between the Steelers and the Eagles this week. And just like you push back a bit with regard to looking the Chargers' way, I think you'll have some good pushback here. So I'll get my side out of the way first. I feel like if Saquon Barkley makes the easiest reception of his career on Monday Night Football, the Eagles are favored in this game. That said, the Philadelphia meltdown did happen, as did the Saints' domination through the first 2 weeks this season. I just feel like I'm not quite ready yet to say that the Saints are the better team, as this line implies to me. Now, a counter here could be that maybe I'm not upgrading the Saints enough with Clint Kubiak seemingly pressing all the right buttons so far as the Saints' new offensive coordinator. And maybe I'm not downgrading the Eagles enough after they haven't looked bad, but they also haven't looked great through 2 weeks. So Chris, come at me, push back on my interest in the Eagles at +3 -120 or +2.5 at even money.
Well, I haven't downgraded Philadelphia because they've been exactly what I expect them to be. So, if there was one team that I, overwhelmingly heard people supporting before the season started, it was Philadelphia. And again, they may very well win the whole thing. They seem to have enough talent if they could put it together, certainly to put themselves in that position. But I can't get the bad taste out of my eyes of what we saw last year when you saw a professional organization quit. And I don't think that there's anything I don't think there is anything worse than when you quit. And that team quit. And I think if you have the personality that you're willing to quit and it's pervasive and accepted and you can kid yourself. Oh, it's a new season. We're not going to do that again. Everything's roses. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. I mean, I know from, my personal experiences as in sports, if you quit or you lose self-confidence, you can get a temporary reset. You can tell yourself whatever you want, but in the back of your head, I'm a quitter, or I'm not this level, or I'm being overly optimistic. I'm going to self-sabotage. And that's what they basically did last night is they, when you've got guys taking off their helmets, it didn't, obviously they got away with a penalty. When you've got coaches making those decisions, when you've got coaches running down the sidelines and screaming with joy instead of screaming with anger, the heads are not in the right place. And again, we get back to the mental aspects of evaluating teams. When that's a leak in the armor, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It needs to be filled. If it doesn't get filled, they're going to be a mediocre team or a mediocre plus team. They won't become elite. So I've got a hard time backing the Philadelphia in that position. As far as the single game goes, if you're looking at a look-ahead line of 3 or 3.5, if they had won that game, the game probably would have opened up Philadelphia -1.5 or 2 possibly. And instead, we're looking at, a game that opened on the New Orleans side or pick and has been nothing but New Orleans. And typically, you're not going to get rich betting New Orleans in this situation over time. But this is a little bit of a different circumstance where this New Orleans team is putting up amazing statistics and efficiency. And you can't ignore it. They scored on their first 7 or 9 drives in the first game? 7, I think. And then they scored on their first 5. Their starting unit has seen barely any third downs. They haven't even punted. Their first unit hasn't even punted. I mean, this is a team firing on all cylinders. So I like to be on the side of, I don't want to step in front of the bus. Maybe I don't have to ride that bus, but I'm not going to step in front of the bus just because they're due to have a bad game and such. So, my model favors New Orleans significantly. I'm not sure, but betting New Orleans, you're really getting the short end of the stick this week because you shouldn't be laying 3. And I don't think this line will stay 3. I think the Eagles will get, when the limits are up, somebody's going to pull the trigger and pull that number back down. But you're not supposed to be able to make a living betting New Orleans in this situation when they were 3.5-point underdogs 2 days ago.
I really like the analogy you made of the Saints not being a bus you want to step in front of, but you also don't have to ride that bus. I see a connection to perhaps my biggest mantra on this show over the years, being that our biggest edge as bettors is the ability to pick and choose our spots. Books have to post sides, totals, money lines, all sorts of other stuff on every single game. And when we can be selective, we should be selective to maximize the edges at our disposal. And if there's not an edge, nothing wrong with passing. So, Chris, maybe this third game I'll run by you is where we might see more alignment here. Looking at the Titans, -1.5 hosting Green Bay. Also a hat tip to Rob Pizzola making this his best bet on the Forward Progress pick show earlier today, as well as Steve Fezzik liking Tennessee alongside you on the Bet US NFL show. The line dropped today after reports of Jordan Love being back at practice for the Packers. And this is, to a large extent, a bet against Love playing or being anywhere close to 100% if he does play. I know Tennessee has had some misleading losses each of the first 2 weeks as well. They could easily be 2-0, and if so, I think this line would be north of -3 in Tennessee's favor. To play the counter on this one as well, I know that turnovers generally not predictive, but poor quarterback decision-making and special team shortcoming starting to look like they may be a bit more of a feature than a bug for Tennessee than most other teams across the league. And we saw Matt LaFleur put forth a masterful game plan last week to flummox the Colts despite the injury to Love and showing that the Packers can get by to at least some reasonable extent when confined to Malik Willis under center. Chris, all that said, what are your thoughts on the Titans laying 1.5 hosting the Packers this week?
You know what? I'm putting it out of my thought process, quite frankly, because there is this slim chance that Love plays, but my belief is that if you had taken the -1 when it was available, that was a pretty good position to take. I don't know how cheap of a money line you can get. You can get kind of missed an opportunity to kind of take a position and do something with it later. Because obviously once he's confirmed out, then that line shoots way up again. So I don't like to get caught up in those situations. I worry because last game, they had an entirely different, Green Bay had an entirely different game plan that, was a surprise and it was successful for them. And that's what you'll often see the first game out for a backup quarterback. They'll see some success, but then the other teams have film, or they have learned, we can defend this guy this way. And then all of a sudden their success level goes down in the subsequent games that follow. So that's what I worry about with Green Bay. So that's just another big unknown. And it's like, why do I want to have, in all honesty, I think Green Bay could win the game even without Love starting. So I'm not going to take a position there's just too many variables for me to feel confident with Tennessee. They can go ahead and win for fun. And it's like, as we mentioned before, I'd rather leave a winner on the table than add a loser, because I basically favor Green Bay as the better team. I don't think that they're a one position team. And again, if we get back to a situation where no matter who the quarterback is, they just simply don't make mistakes, well, that puts them in a good position to be able to win. So I'm unlikely to be involved.
Well, Chris, speaking of there being too many variables for you to get involved in Tennessee, Green Bay, let's talk teasers, a wager type that is inherently against there being too much variance in a game in which you want to have some teaser exposure. And to set the table here, I'll think back to the week 1 show when I had Cleve TA as the guest, and he mentioned that he's had poor results with teasers the last couple of years. It got me to look back at my records and notice the same thing, and that has continued for the first 2 weeks this season. Although fortunately the damage was minimized last week, thanks to your word of caution about the board being full of teaser landmines. I also explored this topic with last week's guest, Doug Kazarian, and noted that on one hand, I'm inclined to think that getting good numbers at good prices will be profitable over time. But on the other hand, I've got to consider that 2+ years at this point of a poor ROI means I may need to plug a hole in my approach. So Chris, from your perspective, how have your teaser results been the last couple of seasons? And how much value, if any, do you see betting teasers in 2024?
Well, I ask you, what percentage of your teasers are Wong teasers, and what percentage of your losses, where are your losses coming from? Are they all Wong teasers, or?
Yeah, you're going to love this. It's almost exclusively Wong teasers. It's not blind. I know that we're going to get to some more outside the box thoughts that you can share to open my eyes and hopefully the eyes of many others as well. I'm wide open to that, but I have just seen that, well, I haven't bet every Wong option on the board these past couple of years. It seems like when I do feel like I'm getting some good numbers and paying, one of my offshores still clinging to -110, I feel like that's got to be profitable. There's got to be a reason that in Nevada, you can't even get -120 on a 2-team 6-point teaser. And yet it has just continually been coming up the wrong way. So yeah, it's been mostly Wong teasers. And I think I know where you're going with this, if it's time for maybe a bit of a slap on the wrist for me or a wake-up call to just broaden my horizons.
Well, I think one of the worst disservices that too many people in the media are doing is that they're parroting what they've heard and have never actually done any of their own research or updated, what wins, what doesn't win. I mean, 3 times in the past week, I've heard people on different shows, basically indicate that all you have to do is go through the 3 and the 7. And that's not true. And not every Wong teaser is a profitable teaser. And you've got to dig a little deeper, do a little, elbow grease and figure out, well, okay, which ones aren't winning? What's changed? So, and that's up to people to do. It depends on what's important to you. Utility value also has personal value. So, I would probably say, last year, I don't think I even hit 50% Wong teasers as what I played. I played a lot of non-Wong stuff because there's a lot of non-Wong teasers that are pretty good and they work fine. So, and then even the ones that are just marginal, well, they may have a utility value to you that makes it worth playing, and especially on standalone games. The power that you have separating and not marrying the teams and treating them as like you get a halftime to be able to readjust. The Patriots Jets game, for example, it's if there's a way to put a Thursday game into play, I love to do that because if it goes down, I get the reset button on the back ends. I haven't wasted a back end. There's nothing worse than wasting a winning teaser leg because it's married to another front teaser. Why would you put 2 don't get me wrong. There's emergency situations where you do it, or just the schedule layout just leaves you no choice. But if you have the opportunity, why in the hell would you ever tease 2 games that start at the same time and risk losing 100% of your bet, even though you only lost 50% of your teams? It makes no sense. So really examining how teasers can work for you instead of just being like a dinosaur relic of put one team here, put one team there, and forget about it. That's old way of thinking. It's old way of thinking. I don't know that I'm making any sense, but I could go on for hours on it.
Yeah, and we'll go on a bit more. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do want to tease out, if you will, pardon the pun, but as much as we can from the way that you approach this, because I think it can be eye-opening to myself and so many others. And to your point about looking at teasers as a mechanism to extract as much value as you can, I think back to Doug Kazarian last week suggesting that the market is less efficient early in the season. So it may be prudent to bet fewer teasers and reduce your staking and gradually ramp that up as the season progresses and as the market gets more efficient. Chris, I see you nodding your head. So does that logic check out in your book?
Yeah, Doug's absolutely right. The variance on these first couple of weeks is just, it dilutes the value of your teaser on top of it. You're not getting the same value. It doesn't. You think just because the totals are lower that you're getting extra value. You're not. You don't know what's going on with these teams. I mean, we're seeing results that are completely atypical of the wildest expectations we had about teams in certain cases. So you're losing value on that end because you don't really know whether you can, what these teams are about. And if you think you do, then you're a fool, because none of us do.
And when it comes to taking that approach to heart, I'm trying to think practically if I can. I know we don't want to get too prescriptive, to each your own with your bankroll and everything along those lines. But Chris, will you sometimes, is it fair game to chunk this season into quarters and say, okay, for weeks 1 through 4, 1 unit on a teaser is X. For weeks 5 through 8, a unit on a teaser bumps up to Y. From weeks 9 to 12, a unit bumps up to Z, and so on. Is that kind of the way you approach it? Or what does it look like for you to gradually consider betting more teasers at higher stakes as the season progresses?
Well, you want to just be able to see some sort of consistency from teams, before you really commit to it, because if the teasers go south, it creates a domino of problems. I don't throw teasers in as just like, excuse me, bets. I'm usually using teasers as part of the arsenal where I'm betting a significant amount of money. I take it seriously, so I want to know what I'm dealing with. I should comment, because the number one, and it's fascinating, because while everybody says, just bet the Wongs, I am surprised at how many people want to tease down a favorite of 5.5 or 6 or 6.5. And so I just don't know how there's a miscommunication on this. Number one, your value of the teaser leg is about $2.85. So if you're teasing a 5.5,
that's if you're laying minus
favorite,
120 on a
or a
6,
a 6-point favorite, you can. You're better off just betting the money line, and you also can pair a money line with an alt line. So, which is essentially creating a teaser, but for a better price. You can create 3-team, once the season gets rolling and you get those, 3-team, you can do like a 3-team parlay and do better than what a teaser could give you just by, some sort of mishmash of money lines. Those are the things you have to look at. But, like in the Jets situation this week, you're in a no-win situation. If you like the Jets, you can't tease them. And if you can't bet them on the money line because they're negative, this situation with a home divisional favorite is minus 19% ROI on the money line. So you either bet the spread or you leave the game alone, and that's what's difficult for some people to accept. And we talked about it on the show. you're talking about the Bengals Commanders number. These people that are using the teaser protection lines, and they put a 9 out there. The teaser protection lines of 9 and 1, you can't beat those. Those are like gifts to the sports books. Yeah, maybe you can create a Wong teaser from the 1, but it's a loser. And you can get a Wong from the 9, but it's a loser. It's a big loser. I mean, it's not even
Is that
close.
point, really quickly to clarify, is that because if somebody wants to create a Wong teaser, so crossing through 3 and 7, if you're starting at +1 or -9, you have to pay 10 extra cents to get a 6.5 point teaser. So you may be magnifying the loss by laying, say, -130 instead of -120. Is that aligned with the point you're making here?
You know what? I believe the teasing down from the 9 is so bad you could be paying -110 and you wouldn't be profitable. To go from 9 to 2, if I'm not mistaken. It's so bad. And in fact, you're better off teasing Washington up on a 10-point teaser where it's profitable. So there's an example of a non-Wong that's profitable. You wouldn't think so, but teasing Washington to the 19 is more profitable than teasing the Bengals down to 2.
And what would be the standard price point of a 10-team teaser for those who are so accustomed to a 2-team 6-pointer in the range of -120? I'd love your thought on, when you look at a 10-teamer, how many teams, what price, and if Washington stands out as an example this week, any other candidates to consider pairing them with?
Well, I'm not advocating a Washington teaser. It's
Gotcha.
For me, I don't do teasers just for the sake of doing teasers. I'm only doing teasers on teams where my model likes that side in the first place. So I have an immediate utility value on that leg. And I'm spacing it on different time periods also, so that if something goes amiss early on, I haven't pissed away the back leg or the back legs. But the 3-team teasers are typically -130 and you're in a ties lose situation. Although DraftKings, I believe it's a ties tie, or then -1. I forget. They might be -120 on a 3-team teaser. I forget. I haven't placed one this year, so it's all a blur to me.
And a lot of us might be better off if we hadn't placed any teasers yet so far this season. But yeah, so 10-point 3-team teasers priced similarly in terms of the VIG to a 2-team 6-pointer at a lot of books. And Chris, I didn't mean to speak over a few minutes ago. I think it was really interesting. You were laying out the point of, on a standard 2-team 6-point teaser, the price of 1 leg, people are looking at, I think you said, in the range of -285. So to look at a team like Buffalo this week, favored by 5.5 or 5, you figure, hey, I'll just tease them down. And if they win the game outright, I cover the teaser leg. Well, their money line price is in the range of -245 to -250. So why not take the discount on the money line? As you said, pair that perhaps with an alt line, and you can kind of create your own teaser. I love that you went there, because that's something that Doug Kazarian also mentioned last week, and it instantly made me think of you, that notion of selectively foregoing teasers in favor of alt lines, or maybe some alt line parlays tied to money lines. And I guess my first thought there was that I love the creative approach, but I had some initial trepidation that books should know how to price these, especially alt lines here. They should know how to price them so that you're not getting enough value taking alt lines at good numbers. Kind of similar, again, to that concept of Nevada books no longer offering -120 or better on 2-team 6-point teasers. But Chris, educate me here and elaborate on your point of view when it comes to that alt line approach.
Well, when I was looking through alt lines last week, it was highway robbery at the big shops. There wasn't anything you could do with them. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to bang my head against the wall and look every week, because there are oftentimes great opportunities in the alt line market. I mean, sometimes you can find idiotic things like you can pay less for a +4.5 than you're going to pay for the +3.5. So at the same shop. So it's boring. It's tedious. And you go through a lot of time and energy sorting through all the garbage that's offered. But when you find the right stuff, you can find some pretty good value. And some places will let you parlay alt lines with each other. So you can create your own teaser that way if you want, just by parlaying alt lines if you want. Some places, I don't know why they don't allow it, but they just don't allow it. So the other oddity with teasers is that you may be getting hosed at a place that only offers minus 125 on a 2-team teaser, or they may offer minus 120, but they may only charge a nickel on that 6.5. So I've got a shop that charges 120, but the 6.5 is 125. That's some nice value. And then that makes the 7-pointer minus 135. There's been some major shops that have, even though it's minus 120 or minus 125, once you go up to the 3 or the 4-team teasers, well, they're paying too much on, or not too much, but they're paying fairly on those prices. So instead of paying, I think a 3-teamer, you're supposed to get plus 150. There's places out there you can get plus 170, and that's better than laying minus 120. So you can find plus 180s out there. And if you add a 4th team, it's the same thing. You can find them mispriced where you're actually better off doing 3 or 4-team teasers. Because you're getting extra value and you're paying actually less than the minus 120 in the conversion way.
Yeah, and if I may try to harness this for the audience here, I think your point being that plus 150 on a 3-teamer is better value than minus 120 on a 2-teamer. I think if we're talking about 4-team teaser options, looking for plus 250 or better would also equate as plus EV relative to minus 120 on a 2-team teaser. Does that check out to you, Chris?
Well, yeah, I think you can get plus 260, plus 270. Back, you used to be able to get plus 300. So there's probably plus 280, plus 270, plus 260 out there. There's certainly plus 160, plus 170 available on the 3s. And I've seen them in situations where they're hosing you on the 2 teams. They just want, they just don't want those 2-team teasers.
Yeah, and I like the creative approach that we can take to work around that. Again, sometimes it will get tedious and it can feel very monotonous, but if your sole goal here is to achieve the best possible ROI, here's a glimpse behind the curtain at how it works from one of the best in the game. And if you just want to sit back and pursue the entertainment value and not roll up your sleeves too much, that's okay too. But I think it can really help to have this understanding of how people can really capture the most possible value out of the market over time. And Chris, if I try to
let me add one thing quickly, though. I'm sorry, it's just really important. People are always wondering how to hedge. For me personally, I'm never going to hedge if I can't. It's nearly never. I'm going to say, if I can't win the hedge bet and the original bet, I don't want to do it. So I'm going to find some sort of an alternative. And teasers, like a front end leg teaser, is great for getting yourself out of a bad bet you want to get out of where the line's moved against you, or it's a great first, hedge opportunity where you get that leg all tied up and you get extra points to play in with a game that you're going to play anyway. That's a standalone game. You can get really creative with that, and alt lines are very, very good ways to hedge also. Instead of, if you need the favorite to win, let's say you've got a big favorite that's coming in Sunday or Monday and you want to hedge out of it. You don't hedge out with the money line. Try to find your best possible alt line on the plus 3.5 and get some plus money. I remember San Francisco, Arizona last year or the year before. I had a huge position. And instead of buying out of the money line, I just took the plus 3.5 plus like 250 or something. And sure enough, they lost by 3. So it was a great way to hedge. So alternate lines you can use the plus side of alternate lines, and you can lay the big heavy prices on alternate lines. There's great value laying the heavy price sometimes.
And if we look to make this actionable, perhaps on the week 3 board, Chris, would you say there are any teaser candidates you're eyeing, Wong or otherwise, on this week's slate? Or perhaps some popular candidates you're intentionally avoiding that others might be flocking to?
Well, the Giants, the Giants are a good, there's no teaser there. The Believe it or not, the Patriot side is something I'm considering. There are profitable ways to tease the Patriots. The Chargers, if they were to get up to 2 or more, but not to 3. There was the Patriots might be interesting as a 3-team teaser starter, and there's another 3-team teaser. I didn't know. I didn't have the 3rd team though. Believe it or not,
New England.
Believe it or not, Baltimore at this level is a 3-team teaser profitable, but I don't think I'm going to use that. So, but no, it's not a great teaser week. I still think the variance is a little high to really focus too much attention on teasers. I'm not. This week will be more of an afterthought, I think, on teasers than anything. I don't feel comfortable with the variance isn't reduced enough yet.
And as you talk about the Patriots and the Ravens, I guess I kind of had a couple false starts there trying to jump in as I look to wrap my head around this in real time. Thinking the Patriots, I know we've discussed 6-point teasers and 10-point teasers here. Same with Baltimore. I guess New England is +6. So are you talking +12 or +16 for Baltimore? They're currently -1. Are you talking +5 or +9? I guess let me zoom out a bit and revise this in a way that hopefully will be more actionable for listeners in the long term. When you're thinking outside the box and, breaking the rules, so to speak, when it comes to long teasers only, we know that is not an absolute rule. What do you look for in a way that an up-and-coming bettor can put into their toolbox to take this approach and run with it moving forward without maybe having to roll up their sleeves too much or have your very advanced level of knowledge and experience, but just some sort of creative ability to find edges in these areas? I guess, Chris, I'm asking if you can distill anything down into more of an elevator pitch for a more tactical approach to extract value on a recurring basis outside the framework of a long teaser.
Value every half point. Every half point is crucial. If you're not creating and make sure that they have utility, value. I'll repeat, don't marry them at the same time. Give yourself options. Don't put yourself in a position where you're wasting legs. Don't be afraid to put yourself in situations that might, put yourself with a really, interesting back leg situation that gives you options to hedge and sweep the board. But using every half point, not trusting that every Wong teaser is a winner is important. Not every Wong teaser is a winner. Some of them are big losers. And anybody that doesn't do their work, sorry. Trust but verify is the best advice that I can give. And I would not blindly just do teasers because you can. I mean, if you don't find other reasons to like that team, because you're going to lose if you're just going to blindly bet Wong teasers, in my opinion. You can't just blindly bet them because you want to have support. I mean, like you as a Chargers backer, hey, maybe that teaser leg's a loser, but it has a utility value to you because you've handicapped the Chargers. So it may be a 1 or 2% loser over time. And I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just pulling numbers.
Sure.
But that utility value to you on a standalone leg certainly makes that up.
I appreciate that, and I want to take a moment to pivot here because I think we've done some mental gymnastics as far as teasers go, and this is advanced, but I hope that people can try to soak this in and really take to heart what you're sharing here based on years of experience and success under your belt. And I think a similar framework in terms of that mental agility could apply to the notion of futures versus in-season bets. I feel like on one hand, there's a science to betting or passing on games at a given moment with an objective approach. And there's also a bit of art involved when it comes to accounting for the past, present, or future value in your portfolio. And when I had TA on my week 1 show, he grappled with how to bet on the Vikings Giants game because of futures exposure he already had on Minnesota. And he mentioned you as I was thinking of you while he discussed his dilemma. First and foremost, well played to TA to spot Minnesota's upside before anybody else I'm aware of. But more broadly, Chris, I recall you speaking in the past to this part of that mental game of betting. How would you say you approach present betting decisions when they may correspond positively or negatively with your futures exposure?
Well, I don't, unfortunately, I'm not in that situation because it is difficult to compartmentalize the two. I had a boatload of baseball futures, and I bet with and against all season long my positions, and that's all you can do. But that's a long sport, and one single game doesn't matter as much. Football is an entirely different issue because one game is huge. It's absolutely huge. So if you have futures, it's going to play into your subconscious if it isn't already slapping you right across the face, front and center. So I don't like to have a lot of futures, but when you have to just ignore that. But see, I have a process where I'm following a model. I'm following data and statistics. I'm not following opinion. So actually, it's very easy for me. I kind of look at a future as like my favorite team. So if your favorite team is the Lions, or you have a future on the Lions, but your data says, hey, this isn't going to be their week. Well, it ain't going to be their week. So let's bet against the Lions. And one way or another, I guess I'll feel some sort of satisfaction. But you have to separate the two entities. They're entirely different. And if you find yourself in a situation where that's coming into play, well, there's something wrong in your process because they are two entirely different bets. They are entirely two different situations. And unless you're facing the last week or two, futures and such do come into play. I have all my baseball all lined up. I know what I got to keep my eyes on. It's not going to affect whether I play a team or not at this point. I'll treat the futures as a completely separate entity. But the daily, weekly betting, that's on its own. I don't care what futures I have. A bet's a bet.
All right. Well, Chris, I will throw one final question your way before we hit the 2 pillars of this show. And I think this can be a bit of a full circle moment because we had a comment when we were talking teasers from RJ watching live on Twitter. Small win or break even on teasers, I'm okay. It provides some account longevity. And you had let me know before we came on that you were interested in speaking to account preservation, with this to me being a timely topic pretty much year round, but especially at the start of the football season, and especially after the Massachusetts Gaming Commission held a hearing with operators last week on the practice of limiting bettors. If this relates in any way to RJ's comment on the teaser segment we just had, or what's going on more broadly across the space, Chris, what do you have top of mind when it comes to the topic of account preservation?
Well, that's a no-brainer. It's there's absolutely nothing more important than preserving my accounts. I can't tell you how many people are in contact with me that have pissed away their privileges, because it is a privilege to be able to wager at a place. People may poo-poo that and say it's my right. No, it's not. It's a privilege to be able to bet at these places, and a good deal isn't a good deal unless it's a good deal for both people. So, if you're going to be one of those guys that's going to go and pick off bad lines, or you're only going to focus on the off lines, or only on these small markets, you know what? They don't need you. If you're not going to give them a fair shake and you're going to try to just pick off all their errors and you're not going to give them any play, they're going to cut you, and you deserve it. I mean, they can't keep track of all this stuff. And, a lot of people are cavalier. Every time I mention this, they're like, oh, you're a wussy. They should be able to take it. And that's horseshit. Blah, blah. Okay. You believe that. How many accounts have you kept? Because, the badge of honor used to be how many accounts have you been kicked out of, until those people realize, no, the badge of honor is how many accounts do you still have that people want. And that's where the badge of honor comes in. And that comes from teasers, parlays, not steaming, not limit betting everything, just not being a nuisance to them, not betting in a way that makes you stick out. If I have a bet, I'm spreading it out. I rarely bet, a full-size bet at any one shop. I want to keep all my accounts active. The parlays and the teasers, they give, if they offer rewards, you can get 2 times to up to 20 times points on parlays and teasers if you're getting in a reward point situation. So that's another part of the equity situation that people don't factor in with it. It gives you cover because when they evaluate your account, if they see a bunch of round robins, if they see teasers, especially non-long teasers, they then they aren't going to categorize you as sharp. So it gives you extra time, and that's most important, is keeping your accounts.
And I realize that account longevity probably doesn't come into play for 95 to 99% of bettors, and learning how to win is a big first foundational building block. But Chris, once bettors start to get there, is a follow-up question to the thoughts you just shared. How do you go about the balance of extracting as much value as you can from your accounts to build your own personal bankroll over time, with that notion of making sure that you're not maybe abusing anything to gain as much longevity as you possibly can, even if that might mean occasionally leaving some meat on the bone?
Oh, I have no problem leaving the meat on the bone. There's every single day I see, lines that I could pick off, and it's just, you have to, it comes from experience. It's not something that I can explain in a reasonable time frame. You just learn what shops are willing to take and what they're not, and what pisses them off and what doesn't. That comes from, the couple of decades I've been betting. That's something, unfortunately, that the newer generation is not going to be able to do as easily. I developed relationships at a lot of these places, or with people that moved to some of these newer places. So I'm able to get a little bit of an indication of, what you could do that they don't like, because some shops, they don't mind you doing this. Whereas other shops, if you do that, goodbye. So you have to know what their goals are. You need to know, is this shop a place that gets a lot of holiday guests in from California? So, when they're putting, a lineup at this number, they really actually do want it. You're not picking off the wrong number. Keep it coming and hit them hard. That's great information to know. That the average person, unless you've developed a relationship with management there, or you've had some experience, isn't going to understand. And there's just dozens and dozens of similar examples of, being able to network even with shops and hey, how about moving that half point? Or do you really need this, or is that a bad line? Or, there's all these different ways that you can get just a little bit of an edge on figuring out what a place is about.
And over the course of the first 2 times you've spoken to account longevity, first when I just teed you up in general, and then after your answers to my follow-up question, I'm going to say that in your first remarks, I thought that we might have to see if we can get you on the other podcast I host, Prime Suspects, and have you go toe-to-toe with Joe Brennan and Adam Bjorn on this topic, because in some ways I feel like your viewpoints might be diametrically opposed. And the way you spoke to my follow-up question, I feel like there's also a lot of overlap in a more overarching viewpoint of the importance of relationships here. And I guess if I'm to think of it through the viewpoint of a newer bettor, somebody who maybe is in a state where the most readily available books would be a DraftKings or a FanDuel, or if somebody like myself is in California and the regulated books aren't available, but there are the bookmakers or bet onlines of the world, it's much different in these kinds of digital, modern day frameworks to try to build a relationship than it may have been years, decades ago, when there was an in-person relationship that could be had. Chris, to those up and coming bettors these days, whether it's regulated or offshore, how would you recommend trying to build some sort of relationship, if that's even possible, to your point, to still extract as much value as you can for yourself as a bettor, while making sure that you are preserving the right accounts for as long as you can?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, some of these places have, social, have a social media presence that you can open up a door, plausibly. It's it is a lot harder to do that now than it used to be. It's more important to just use common sense and know that if you're betting overnight lines, you're going to stick out like a thumb. If you're betting, first, in the middle of the night, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. If you're betting with the B team risk managers, they're going to treat you differently than the A team risk managers. And you can figure that out based on how the confirmation process goes. If it takes longer, or you're getting cut between these certain hours, or it's hard to explain. You can pick up little nuanced things from these places by the way they're approving you, by the speed that they do, by just various factors that do involve interaction of some sort. If you bet something, are they moving it right away afterward, or are they leaving the lineup? That's one thing. If they're moving the line after you bet every time, well, that's not something you necessarily like or dislike, but that's information of value.
Yeah, and to your earlier point, it used to be a badge of honor if you had been banned by a certain number of books. Now maybe the badge of honor is being able to maintain those accounts over time. I think when you use the phrase badge of honor, Chris, that could be my jumping off point into the hops as well here as we round the corner, because in my book, the badge of honor for you is that affinity for Jim Beam. And I'm wondering if your penchant for Kentucky bourbon is still going strong these days.
Yeah, it is, but I'm buying a cheaper brand. They raised the price significantly. I think some Japanese corporation bought them. So
Suntory.
It kind of took the air out of my tires on it. But I'll drink anything, quite frankly. So but no, I prefer it just depends on the mood. I think the one thing I dislike is probably gin, but I'll even drink gin if that's all there is.
Yeah, didn't you have a hilarious story from years ago where like the only drink out at a certain moment was gin that had been given to you from some sort of contest or casino party, and you just decided to give it a go anyway?
Yeah. I mean, it's I think your palate is, you grade all the beers that you grade. Our palate's mature. I mean, there's things that we would never have eaten as children that we love now. Sure. And, at one point alcohol tasted horrible to us. And you may or may not have liked beer initially or liquor initially, but over time your palate changes and you develop different tastes. I mean, the only thing that I'm not open to is eating seafood.
All right. Well, if eating seafood is nowhere to be found in your day-to-day routine, Chris, I would like to weave in the Belinsky Minute to focus on what does reside within your day-to-day routine, because Dave was one of the most routine, regimented people that I've ever come across. When it came to the football season, he was known by the staff at Lotus of Siam as Friday Dave because of his substantial takeout orders to sustain himself throughout a football weekend. He wouldn't leave his house from Friday evening through Monday morning. He considered it a sacred time to handicap and then grade results for full college and NFL slates. And I think he really set himself up for success with his routine, including putting 3 TVs and an elliptical in his home office overlooking a fairway at the Las Vegas Country Club, also having a sauna in the house to clear things out mentally and physically, and of course, that world-class food from Lotus of Siam. And then on Mondays, I think he pivoted from sacred time being glued to games, odds screens, and his handicapping charts to a more sacred time to just disconnect. Grab lunch at a local mom and pop restaurant, review box scores in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and take notes by hand. Chris, to that end, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on your routine. Having moved this summer, I think you briefly touched on the importance of a routine during today's Bet US NFL show, and would love it if you could elaborate on the value that you place on having a routine and what an ideal one looks like for you.
I think it's the most important aspect. I really do. I believe it's the number one priority. Now, I'll just use this example. When people go on a vacation and they try to bet and their routine is disrupted, I mean, inevitably, the vast majority of those instances, the people lose. I mean, when you're out of your element, when you're dealing with technology issues or timing issues, and you're not in your comfort zone, significantly more often than not, it's going to work against you. Because it disrupts your brain waves. It throws things out of kilter. And granted, sometimes once in a blue moon, it might be a great thing, but I find it to be the opposite. And I'm kind of disappointed because I'm in my new house and I love it. And it's been great for my mood. It's improved my whole mental outlook, but I don't have my routine in place. And it's a problem. I need to get a routine set in stone because, when I did really well in Circa years ago and I had great results betting, I had a routine that was like bing, bang, boom. I mean, I didn't have an alarm clock and I was waking up at the exact same time every day. And I was doing the same things at the same times and the same days of the week, like clockwork. And now I'm more reactive and just stuff gets in the way. There's no continuity. And it's causing me problems. And thankfully, I'm in a place where I can relax and I don't get pissed off. And I'm like, okay, serenity now. But you can't have that. We need every bit of mental energy that we can have focused on the task at hand. And that's finding value and efficiency and doing the work. I mean, if we're distracted with technology issues or what time of the day am I going to be able to do this, or I'm running out of time issues, or I don't, anything that impedes the continuity is no good for us.
Well, speaking of running into time issues, I know that we're now north of an hour, 15 minutes. Chris, I'm going to let you get back to everything you've got on your plate and wrap us up here. To the audience, want to thank you for tuning in and wish you best of luck with your week 3 bets. Remember to follow Chris if you're not doing so already on Twitter at Las Vegas Cris. That's CRIS. Follow his YouTube channel by the same name and catch him every week on the Bet US NFL show. Chris, thank you for making time during your packed schedule. I always appreciate it. Best of luck this week, and I'm always looking forward to our next get-together in Vegas.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your next visit. We'll have a barbecue out here.
Excellent.